Rejected mail-order bride saves a stranger in the mud, only to learn he owns the entire ranch. Every day seemed the same, waking up to the sound of roosters, helping her mother with household chores, walking to the market to sell small crafts, and returning home to a house that smelled faintly of wood smoke and dust. Her dreams, however, were bigger than the narrow streets and familiar faces. She longed to see wide open fields, rolling hills, and a life that held the promise of adventure, freedom, and maybe even love. When she first heard about mail-order marriages, a mix of curiosity and hope ignited inside her. She thought of it not as desperation, but as a chance to step into a world she had only imagined in books and in the stories of travelers who had once passed through her town. After weeks of careful correspondence, writing letters back and forth with a man she had never met, Clara made her decision. She would travel to the distant ranch town to meet Henry, the man who had written to her with polite words and promises of a better future. She packed her few belongings in a small trunk, some simple dresses, a pair of sturdy shoes, a blanket, and the letters that had kept her company during lonely nights. Her mother hugged her tightly at the station, her eyes moist with worry. "Be careful, Clara." "People are not always what they seem," she said, her voice quivering. Clara nodded, masking her own nerves with a brave smile. "I will be careful, Mother, but I have to try. I want to see what the world is really like." The journey was long, exhausting, and at times frightening. Clara had never traveled such a distance alone. She rode in rattling trains that seemed to shake her to her bones, gazed out of windows at landscapes that changed from rolling fields to dusty plains, and slept in small inns along the way. On some nights, she felt a pang of loneliness so deep it almost made her turn back, but the thought of Henry and the life she hoped to build kept her moving forward. Finally, after days of travel, she arrived in the ranch town, a place that felt both strange and exciting. The air smelled of horses and dry earth, a smell she would later grow to love. She saw people moving with purpose, their boots kicking up dust as they worked tirelessly, their faces sun-browned from the harsh sunlight. Everything was new, unfamiliar, yet strangely alive. Clara approached Henry's ranch with a mix of excitement and fear. The house was large, made of rough-hewn timber, with wide porches that seemed to stretch endlessly. Horses grazed in the fields nearby, and the sound of cattle lowing filled the air. She took a deep breath, adjusting her dress and smoothing the wrinkles from the long journey. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She knocked on the large wooden door, her heart pounding in her chest. Henry opened the door, and the first sight of him made Clara's heart skip a beat. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a face that seemed carved from stone, yet his eyes held a strange depth, a sharpness that made her feel both nervous and curious. She introduced herself politely, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. "Hello, I'm Clara. I've come from far away. We've been corresponding, and I thought it was time to meet in person." Henry's expression was unreadable. He nodded, studying her quietly as if trying to measure something invisible. Clara smiled, trying to appear confident, but inside she felt a twinge of doubt. She had imagined this meeting countless times, each version better than the last, but now, faced with reality, she realized that real life was never as simple as dreams. The conversation that followed was awkward and brief. Henry spoke in short, clipped sentences, polite yet distant. Clara tried to ask questions about the ranch, about the life she might have, but he offered only minimal answers. He seemed to judge her with every glance, every word measured and deliberate. After a few moments, Henry spoke plainly. "I don't think this is going to work. I don't believe we are suited for each other." The words hit Clara like a cold wind. She froze, unable to respond at first. Rejection was not a new feeling in her life, but to hear it so bluntly, so directly, from a man she had traveled across the country to meet, felt like a dagger to the chest. She tried to hide her hurt, but the sting of disappointment was undeniable. She had come here with hope, with faith in a new beginning, and now it seemed all her plans had crumbled. Clara left the ranch, her steps heavy, her heart aching. The streets of the town no longer seemed welcoming. The dust that had felt alive before now felt suffocating. She wandered aimlessly, unsure of where to go or what to do next. Every face in the crowd seemed to remind her of her failure. She thought of her mother's worried eyes, of the letters that had carried her hope, and of the long journey that now felt wasted. Yet, even in the midst of her sorrow, a spark of determination flickered inside her. She realized that giving up was not an option. She might have been rejected, but that did not define her worth or her future. Clara decided she would find a way to survive, to make her life in this unfamiliar town, even if it meant starting from scratch. She found temporary work wherever she could, cleaning houses, helping in small shops, and assisting at local stables. Each day was a challenge, but Clara learned to adapt quickly. She discovered a resilience she had never known she possessed. She became known for her diligence and kindness, helping neighbors and strangers alike with a smile, even when her own heart felt heavy. Slowly, the town began to feel less like a place of rejection and more like a place of opportunity. She began to meet people who admired her courage, who respected her willingness to face hardship head-on. And though her heart still ached for the dream that had not come true, she started to realize that life could offer unexpected joys if one was willing to step forward with hope. One evening, after a long day of work, Clara sat on the steps of a small inn, watching the sun dip behind the hills. She thought of Henry, of the rejection that had shaken her so deeply. She wondered if she would ever see him again, and whether the town could ever feel like home without his presence. Yet, as she looked out over the wide fields and breathed in the cool evening air, she felt a strange sense of peace. She had survived the journey, the rejection, and the fear. She had faced the unknown and had not broken. And in that moment, Clara understood something vital. Her life was her own, and no single rejection could take away her courage, her kindness, or her hope for a better tomorrow. Clara's days in the town became a rhythm of work and quiet reflection. She had learned to navigate the streets, to greet neighbors with a smile, and to find small joys in ordinary moments. Yet, her heart still carried a sense of emptiness from the rejection she had faced. Every morning, as she walked to the stable or to the market, she felt a quiet longing for something she could not yet name. Life was hard, but Clara had begun to understand that hardships could be faced with courage, and that even small acts of kindness had meaning. She had grown stronger, more aware of herself, and more determined to live on her own terms. One morning, as Clara set out on her usual walk through the countryside, the sky was clear, and the air smelled fresh with the scent of dew-soaked grass. Birds chirped in the distance, and the sun cast a warm, golden light over the rolling hills. Clara enjoyed these walks. They allowed her to think, to breathe, and to feel connected to the world around her. She followed a narrow dirt path that led toward a small creek, a path she had never taken before. The land was open and beautiful, dotted with wildflowers and tall grasses that swayed gently in the breeze. Clara felt a sense of calm and freedom that she had rarely experienced in her life. As she rounded a bend in the path, she noticed something unusual. In the distance, near the edge of the creek, a man seemed to be struggling. The ground near the water was soft and muddy, and it appeared that he had become stuck. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen a man in such distress before, and the sight of him struggling to free himself filled her with concern. Without a second thought, she ran toward him, her shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth as she hurried. She could hear his frustrated calls for help, though they were muffled by the thick mud that clung to his legs. When she reached him, Clara could see that he was waist-deep in the mud. He was tall, with broad shoulders and strong arms, but even his strength was no match for the thick, sticky ground. His face was tense with concentration, and beads of sweat glistened on his forehead. Clara felt a mixture of fear and determination. She knew that helping him would not be easy, but she could not walk away. "Hold on, I'll help you," she called out, her voice steady despite the anxiety swirling in her chest. Clara positioned herself carefully, planting her feet firmly on the firmer ground nearby. She reached out and grabbed the man's hand, pulling with all her strength. At first, he slipped back into the mud, and Clara struggled to maintain her balance. She could feel the earth sucking at her shoes and tugging at her dress, but she refused to give up. "You can do it. I've got you," she shouted, summoning every ounce of energy. Together, they fought against the mud inch by inch, until finally, with a final heave, the man lurched forward and pulled himself free. Both of them were covered in mud from head to toe, breathing heavily but safe. The man staggered backward, brushing the mud from his arms and face, his expression a mix of shock and gratitude. Clara, too, wiped her hands on her dress, feeling exhausted but proud. "Thank you," he said, his voice deep and calm. "I didn't know if I could get out on my own." Clara smiled, trying to appear casual despite her pounding heart. "It's all right," she said. "I couldn't just leave you there." Someone had to help. For a moment, they stood silently, catching their breath and taking in the scenery around them, the creek, the soft hills, and the golden sunlight. It was a moment of unexpected connection, one that neither of them could have predicted. The man introduced himself simply as a traveler, though he did not reveal much else. Clara noticed that he spoke with a quiet confidence, a calm that suggested he was used to facing challenges. He offered her a warm drink from a small flask he carried, and Clara accepted, grateful for the gesture. They sat together on a nearby rock, talking quietly about the countryside, the weather, and the small joys of simple life. Clara found herself relaxing in his presence, feeling an ease she had not experienced since arriving in the town. Despite the mud and the exhaustion, there was a sense of adventure and connection in the air, a feeling that something important had just happened. As they spoke, Clara began to notice details about the man that intrigued her. His hands were strong and calloused, suggesting years of hard work. His eyes, though kind, held a certain depth, a story that was hidden beneath the surface. He did not boast or complain, and his words were measured and thoughtful. Clara felt drawn to his quiet strength and humility, qualities she admired deeply. She realized that true character was revealed not in appearances or titles, but in actions, like his willingness to trust her in that moment of vulnerability, and her willingness to help him without hesitation. After some time, the man thanked her once more and stood to leave, but Clara hesitated. "Will I see you again?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity and hope. The man smiled faintly, a mysterious expression that did not fully answer her question. "Perhaps," he said simply. "The world is full of unexpected paths." With that, he walked away, leaving Clara alone by the creek. She watched him disappear over the hill, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and wonder. She did not know who he truly was, but she knew that the encounter had changed something inside her. It reminded her that kindness, courage, and compassion could open doors in ways she had never imagined. For the next few days, Clara could not stop thinking about the man in the mud. The memory of his grateful expression, his calm presence, and the unusual connection they had shared stayed with her. She found herself walking the same paths, hoping for another encounter, even as she focused on her daily work. Every time she helped someone, every time she showed courage or kindness, she thought of him and the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. Clara began to understand that life was unpredictable, and that sometimes moments of bravery and generosity could have far-reaching consequences. One afternoon, as she was carrying a basket of supplies to a neighbor's house, she overheard whispers about a wealthy ranch owner in the town, a man who was known to be reserved, powerful, and somewhat mysterious. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the man she had helped in the mud? The idea seemed impossible, Yet the thought filled her with curiosity and a sense of anticipation. She realized that life often had hidden surprises and that people were not always who they seemed to be at first glance. The memory of the creek, the mud, and the brief connection lingered in her mind, reminding her that acts of kindness often returned in unexpected ways. That evening, as Clara sat alone by a small fire in her rented room, she reflected on the day and the events that had unfolded. She thought about the rejection she had faced, the challenges of adjusting to a new town, and the small victories that had marked her journey. She understood that courage was not only about facing physical danger, but also about facing life's uncertainties with hope and determination. The encounter in the mud had reminded her of her own strength and her ability to make a difference, even in situations that seemed hopeless. Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her life, though filled with challenges, was also filled with possibilities. In the days that followed, Clara continued her work, helping neighbors, learning new skills, and exploring the town. She felt more confident, more capable, and more connected to the world around her. And though she did not yet know it, her act of bravery in the mud had set in motion events that would change her life forever. The stranger she had saved was not just a traveler in need. He was a man whose path would soon intertwine with hers in ways she could never have predicted. Clara's journey was only beginning, and the lessons she had learned about courage, kindness, and resilience would guide her through the challenges and surprises yet to come. After the encounter by the creek, Clara's life began to take on a quiet rhythm. She continued her work, moving between small jobs around the town, helping in the market, assisting at the stables, and occasionally delivering supplies to local families. Each day, she became more familiar with the streets, the people, and the patterns of the town. Even so, her mind often wandered back to the stranger she had saved in the mud. She could not forget his calm eyes, his quiet strength, or the strange connection that had formed between them in those few minutes. The thought of him lingered like a shadow, both mysterious and comforting, reminding her of the unpredictable twists life could take. Clara had learned to keep her curiosity in check. She did not ask too many questions or try to uncover his identity too soon. Instead, she observed from a distance, noticing that he appeared occasionally in town. Sometimes he would be seen at the general store, examining supplies with careful attention. Other times, he would visit the stables, moving among the horses as if he understood each one personally. Clara could not help but watch him with quiet interest. He seemed to move with purpose, but always with a calm, measured presence that set him apart from others. There was something about him that made people pause, even when he was silent. Clara began to sense that he was someone important, someone whose life held more weight than anyone could immediately see. Rumors began to drift through the town. The locals spoke in hushed tones about a wealthy ranch owner who lived on the outskirts, a man who rarely mingled with the townspeople but whose influence was everywhere. They said he was powerful, respected, and perhaps a little mysterious. Some spoke of his generosity, while others hinted at his strictness and pride. Clara listened to these stories with growing curiosity. Could the stranger she had helped in the mud be this same man? The thought seemed improbable, yet the details fit. The way he moved, the quiet authority he carried, and the subtle way people seemed to react to him. She did not yet know for sure, but the idea sparked a mixture of intrigue and apprehension inside her. One morning, Clara was tasked with delivering supplies to the far side of the town, near the main ranch. She carried a large basket filled with food, blankets, and other essentials for the household. The path took her through fields and along dirt roads that she had never explored before. As she walked, she thought of the man again, wondering if she might see him. She imagined asking him about his life, about the reasons he had seemed so quiet and reserved. Part of her felt nervous at the thought, unsure of how he would react. but curiosity and a sense of connection outweighed her fear. Something about their brief encounter had created a bond, even if neither of them understood it yet. When she arrived at the ranch, Clara was struck by its size and beauty. The house was larger than she had imagined, made of sturdy wood with wide porches that stretched across the front. Horses grazed in the fields, and cattle moved slowly in the pens nearby. Clara's eyes widened as she realized the scale of the place. This was no ordinary farm. It was a true ranch, thriving and well-managed. She felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. Delivering supplies to such a place was both exciting and intimidating, and she wondered how the people who lived there would receive her. As she approached the main house, Clara noticed movement near the porch. A man emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, his posture confident and calm. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be him, the stranger from the mud? Her mind raced, remembering the rescue and the strange feeling of connection she had felt that day. He looked at her, and for a moment their eyes met. Recognition flickered in both of them, though neither spoke immediately. Clara felt a mixture of nervousness and relief. She had been unsure if she would ever see him again, and now here he was, standing before her, calm and composed as always. The man spoke, his voice steady and polite. "You must be Clara," he said. "I heard you would be delivering these supplies." Clara nodded, her hands gripping the basket tightly. "Yes, sir. I've brought everything you requested." She tried to keep her voice even, though her heart was racing. He studied her carefully, as if weighing her words and actions. Clara realized that there was more to him than met the eye. This was not just the man she had helped in the mud. This was someone whose life and responsibilities carried weight far beyond her understanding. As she handed over the supplies, Clara noticed how carefully he treated the items, checking them with a quiet precision. It was clear that he valued the work of those around him and took responsibility seriously. Clara felt a deep sense of respect growing within her. She realized that his calm and composed demeanor was not arrogance, but a reflection of the responsibilities he carried. Helping him had been more than an act of kindness. It had been a meaningful connection between two people, each facing the challenges of life in their own way. After the delivery, the man invited Clara to stay for a moment. They sat on the porch, the warm sunlight casting long shadows across the wooden floor. They spoke quietly about the ranch, the work that needed to be done, and the challenges of managing such a large property. Clara listened intently, fascinated by the details and the insight he shared. She realized that he was not only hardworking but also thoughtful, observant, and wise. The brief conversation deepened her curiosity and admiration for him. She began to see that his life was far more complex than she had imagined, and that her initial judgment of him had been incomplete. As the afternoon passed, Clara began to notice small hints about his identity. The way the ranch workers moved around him with respect, the careful attention he paid to every detail, and the subtle authority in his voice all suggested that he was indeed the wealthy ranch owner the town had spoken about. A mixture of surprise and disbelief filled her. Could it really be the same man she had helped in the mud? The realization was almost too much to grasp. Yet, as she observed him, she began to understand that life often held surprises that challenged expectations and reshaped understanding. The man who had rejected her as a bride, the stranger she had rescued, and now the respected ranch owner. They were all aspects of the same person, revealing themselves slowly and deliberately. The encounter left Clara with a whirlwind of emotions. There was confusion. How could someone so distant and mysterious also be the man she had helped in such a vulnerable moment? There was curiosity. What did this mean for her, for their paths crossing again? And there was a growing admiration, a recognition of his strength, kindness, and quiet authority. Clara realized that first impressions and social expectations were often misleading. True character, she understood now, revealed itself in moments of vulnerability, courage, and selflessness. Her rescue of the man in the mud had been such a moment, and it had created a bridge between them that was slowly revealing its significance. In the days that followed, Clara found herself thinking about him constantly. She watched for him in town, noted the way the ranch workers responded to his presence, and remembered the calm dignity he had shown. She reflected on her own journey, the rejection, the struggle to adapt, and the moments of courage that had defined her path. Clara understood that life was unpredictable and that meaningful connections often appeared when least expected. She realized that the stranger she had saved was more than just a passerby in her life. He was a person whose story was intertwined with hers in ways she had yet to discover. By the end of the week, Clara had grown more confident in her interactions with him. She no longer felt the nervousness that had gripped her at the ranch. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of anticipation, a hope that perhaps this connection could lead to something meaningful. She did not yet know what the future held, but she understood that courage, kindness, and integrity had already created a bond between them. Clara began to see that her journey was about more than surviving rejection. It was about discovering the power of compassion, the significance of selflessness, and the ways in which small actions could shape lives. Clara had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the town and the ranch, yet she could not shake the curiosity that the mysterious man had sparked in her. She thought about him often, how he had struggled in the mud, the quiet gratitude in his voice, and the calm authority he carried when they met at the ranch. Each day, she wondered who he truly was and why their paths had crossed in such an unusual way. She did not realize that the answers to her questions were closer than she imagined, waiting for a moment when circumstances would finally bring the truth into the open. One morning, Clara was sent on an errand to deliver supplies directly to the main ranch house. She carried baskets of food, linens, and other necessities through the dusty paths, her mind occupied with the tasks ahead. As she approached the porch, she noticed the man standing outside, examining the grounds with the same calm, measured demeanor she had come to recognize. Their eyes met, and for a moment everything seemed suspended in time. The familiarity of his gaze stirred memories of the mud incident, the fear, the effort, and the small, fleeting connection they had shared. Clara's heart pounded as she realized that the man she had rescued was the same person she now faced, and yet the realization carried a weight she had not anticipated. She stepped forward cautiously, her hands gripping the baskets tightly. "Good morning," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. He looked at her with a faint smile, his expression calm yet unreadable. "Good morning, Clara. I see you've brought everything," he replied, his voice polite, almost formal. As she began to hand over the supplies, Clara noticed the way he moved, confident, deliberate, and precise, every action reflecting a sense of authority that made it clear he was not an ordinary ranch worker. It was then that a realization began to dawn on her, slowly and almost painfully. The stranger she had saved, the man whose life she had touched in a moment of courage, was not merely a traveler. He was Henry, the very man who had rejected her as a bride. Clara felt a surge of conflicting emotions, shock, disbelief, and a twinge of anger. How could this be? The man who had dismissed her, who had turned her away with such cold finality, was the same man whose life she had unknowingly touched in an act of bravery. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. The baskets of supplies felt heavier in her hands, not from their weight, but from the sudden gravity of the revelation. Henry watched her carefully, noting her hesitation but saying nothing. He seemed calm, yet there was a quiet intensity in his gaze, as if he knew the realization that was unfolding within her. As Clara placed the baskets down, she could no longer contain her curiosity. "It's you," she said softly, almost to herself. "You're Henry." His lips curved into a faint smile, but he remained silent for a moment, letting her absorb the truth. Clara's mind raced with questions. How could he appear so ordinary in the mud, struggling like anyone else, and yet be the owner of this vast ranch. Why had he rejected her in the first place? And most importantly, what did this mean for her and for the bond they had formed in that brief, muddy encounter? Henry finally spoke, his voice calm but deliberate. "Yes, it's me," he said. "I suppose this comes as a surprise." Clara nodded, words failing her for a moment. She remembered the way he had struggled, the way she had pulled him from the mud with all her strength. In that instant, he had been human, vulnerable, and entirely dependent on her courage. It was a memory that now carried a new significance, one that reshaped her understanding of him completely. She realized that her act of bravery had revealed something important, not only about him, but about herself. She had shown courage, compassion, and a willingness to act selflessly, qualities that could not be measured by appearances, wealth, or social standing. Henry continued, explaining carefully why he had appeared distant and reserved during their first meeting. He admitted that he had been testing her character, looking for qualities that could not be assessed through letters or first impressions alone. Clara listened, a mixture of disbelief and cautious understanding filling her mind. She had never imagined that rejection could carry such a purpose, that a moment of judgment could conceal a deeper recognition of value. The story he told was not one of arrogance, but of careful observation, a desire to understand true character before making decisions that affected both their lives. Clara felt a slow change within her, a shift from resentment to comprehension, from confusion to clarity. The realization settled in fully as she looked around the ranch. Everything, the workers' respect, the order and precision of the property, the quiet authority Henry carried, made sense in a way it had not before. The man who had seemed distant and judgmental was not harsh or unkind. He had simply been careful, deliberate, and discerning. Clara's heart softened as she recognized the depth of his responsibility and the weight he carried daily. Her initial anger and hurt melted into a new respect, a recognition that life often required patience, understanding, and the courage to see beyond first impressions. As the conversation continued, Clara found herself asking questions, seeking to understand him better, not out of curiosity alone, but from a desire to grasp the truth of his life and the meaning behind his actions. Henry answered openly, sharing stories of the ranch, the work involved in managing it, and the challenges he faced daily. He spoke of responsibility, of the balance between authority and fairness, and of the importance of integrity in both business and personal life. Clara listened intently, struck by his humility and thoughtfulness. He was not just a wealthy man. He was someone who had earned respect through diligence, care, and quiet leadership. The encounter deepened her admiration and reshaped her perception entirely. As the afternoon passed, Clara began to understand that her life had intersected with Henry's in a meaningful way. Their paths had crossed at the creek not by chance, but in a way that revealed the core qualities of both their characters. She had acted courageously, showing kindness and selflessness, while he had allowed himself to be vulnerable, trusting her in a moment of need. That encounter had created a bridge between them, one built not on appearances or social expectations, but on the true measure of character. Clara realized that this bridge had the potential to lead to something far more significant than either of them had anticipated. Henry's gaze softened as he observed her realization. He could see the mixture of emotions, shock, confusion, and the beginnings of understanding, playing across her face. He spoke gently, acknowledging the courage she had shown and expressing his admiration for her actions. Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a combination of relief, pride, and an unexpected sense of connection. The realization that she had been recognized for her true self, rather than judged solely on appearance or circumstance, filled her with a quiet joy that she had not expected to feel so soon. By the time Clara left the ranch that day, her mind was alive with reflection. She understood that life was rarely straightforward, and that moments of challenge and vulnerability often carried deeper significance. She thought of the mud, of her determination to act selflessly, and of the way Henry had allowed her bravery to shine. The world suddenly seemed richer, filled with possibilities that she had not imagined before. Clara recognized that rejection, confusion, and uncertainty were not endpoints. They were opportunities for growth, understanding, and meaningful connections. As she walked back through the fields, the sun casting long shadows across the land, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced rejection, uncertainty, and the unknown, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to the world around her. The revelation of Henry's identity did not diminish her courage. Instead, it illuminated the value of her actions, the significance of her choices, and the power of empathy and selflessness. Clara understood that life often rewarded bravery and kindness in unexpected ways, and that true connections were forged not by circumstance alone, but by character, integrity, and courage. That evening, as Clara sat by the small fire in her room, she reflected on the events of the day. She thought of Henry, of the unexpected revelation, and of the bond that had formed between them. She realized that life was full of surprises, and that meaningful relationships often began in moments of challenge, trust, and vulnerability. Clara felt a sense of peace and anticipation, knowing that her journey with Henry was only beginning. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. She had learned that courage, integrity, and kindness could shape destiny, and that her own actions had already created a foundation for something extraordinary. After the revelation of Henry's true identity, Clara's life took on a new rhythm, one filled with a mixture of curiosity, anticipation, and cautious optimism. She had come to understand him in ways she could not have imagined before. The quiet strength beneath his calm demeanor, the humility hidden behind his authority, and the kindness he had shown in subtle, unexpected ways. The memory of the day she had pulled him from the mud lingered vividly in her mind, no longer just an unusual encounter, but a defining moment that had shaped the connection between them. It was a moment that revealed not only Henry's trust in her, but also her own courage and resilience. In the days that followed, Clara found herself spending more time at the ranch. She delivered supplies, assisted with small chores, and helped with tasks that required careful attention. Henry observed her quietly, noting her diligence, her patience, and the thoughtfulness she brought to every task. There was a growing sense of mutual respect between them, one built not on appearances or social expectation, but on character and shared experience. Clara began to see Henry not just as the wealthy ranch owner who had rejected her, but as a man with depth, integrity, and a capacity for understanding that few others possessed. At first, Clara felt nervous in his presence. She remembered the sting of rejection, the awkwardness of their first meeting, and the uncertainty that had followed. Yet she also recognized the growth she had experienced since arriving in the town, the courage she had shown, the resilience she had cultivated, and the self-respect she had earned through her efforts. With this understanding, she began to interact with Henry more openly, asking questions, sharing observations, and even laughing at moments of shared amusement. Slowly, a bond began to form, one rooted in mutual respect, trust, and an appreciation for each other's qualities. Henry, for his part, found himself drawn to Clara's presence in ways he had not anticipated. Her bravery in the mud incident had left a lasting impression, revealing her selflessness and her ability to act without hesitation when faced with a challenge. Her resilience in adjusting to a new town, finding work, and navigating unfamiliar situations spoke to a strength he deeply admired. He began to appreciate the subtle ways she brought warmth and energy to the ranch, the way her presence seemed to encourage those around her, and the honesty and integrity she displayed in every action. For Henry, these qualities were far more significant than beauty, status, or social expectation. They revealed Clara's true character, something that could not be measured by first impressions alone. One afternoon, as Clara was organizing supplies in the main house, Henry approached her with a quiet smile. "Clara," he said, "I want you to know that I've come to admire your courage and kindness. The way you helped me that day in the mud, it spoke more about your character than any letter or conversation could. I want you to understand that your actions have not gone unnoticed." Clara looked up, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. She felt a deep sense of recognition, realizing that the courage she had shown in a single moment had created a lasting impression on someone whose life she could never have imagined touching. As the days turned into weeks, Clara and Henry began to spend more time together. They walked through the fields, discussing the work of the ranch, the challenges of daily life, and the dreams they each held for the future. Clara found herself laughing more freely, enjoying the simple pleasures of companionship and conversation. She began to understand Henry's perspective, the weight of responsibility he carried, the care he took in managing the ranch, and the thoughtful consideration he gave to those who worked under him. In turn, Henry came to appreciate Clara's insight, her ability to see beyond appearances, and her willingness to act with kindness and integrity in every situation. The townspeople began to notice the change as well. Clara's presence at the ranch became familiar and welcomed. She was admired for her courage, her diligence, and the warmth she brought to every interaction. Henry's respect for her became evident in subtle ways. The way he sought her opinion on decisions, the care he showed in ensuring her comfort, and the quiet acknowledgement of her abilities. It was clear that a mutual understanding had developed, one built on shared experiences, respect, and an appreciation for the qualities that mattered most in life. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, casting a golden glow across the fields, Clara and Henry walked together along a familiar path. The air was warm, filled with the scent of grass and earth, and the quiet sounds of the ranch created a sense of peace and belonging. Henry spoke softly, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and sincerity. "Clara, I realize now that first impressions can be misleading. I judged you based on what I thought I expected, but I see now that true character cannot be measured so easily. Your courage, your kindness, and your integrity are qualities that matter far more than I could have imagined." Clara listened, her heart lifting with the warmth of his words. She understood that this moment was a turning point, a moment when their relationship was no longer defined by past misunderstandings or fears, but by recognition, respect, and the potential for something greater. Clara smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. "Thank you, Henry," she said softly. "I've learned a lot about courage and patience since coming here, and I've realized that life often has a way of teaching us lessons through unexpected experiences. The moment in the mud, it showed me that even small acts of bravery and kindness can create connections that last far longer than we imagine." Henry nodded, his expression thoughtful. They walked together in silence for a few moments, each reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The rejection, the uncertainty, the courage, and the growing understanding that had formed the foundation of their bond. As time passed, their relationship deepened naturally. They worked together on the ranch, shared meals, and spent quiet evenings talking about their hopes and dreams. Clara felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before, not just because of the comfort of the ranch, but because she was seen, appreciated, and respected for who she truly was. Henry, too, found joy in their companionship, recognizing that the bond they shared was built on more than circumstance. It was built on trust, courage, and genuine understanding. Their connection was not sudden or dramatic, but steady, sincere, and enduring. Eventually, Clara and Henry reached a point where they could openly acknowledge the bond that had grown between them. It was a bond rooted in respect, strengthened by shared experiences, and nurtured by acts of courage and kindness. They understood that their relationship was not defined by wealth, appearances, or first impressions, but by the qualities that truly mattered: honesty, integrity, compassion, and the willingness to act with courage when it mattered most. Clara realized that she had found not only a home on the ranch, but also a partner who valued her for the person she was, not for what she could offer superficially. The townspeople, who had watched Clara and Henry's relationship develop quietly over time, began to understand the depth of their connection. They admired Clara for her courage and perseverance, and they respected Henry for his discernment, humility, and ability to recognize true character. The ranch, once a symbol of authority and distance, became a place of warmth, connection, and shared purpose. Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her actions had contributed to the foundation of a meaningful and lasting bond. In the end, Clara's journey was one of growth, resilience, and discovery. She had faced rejection, uncertainty, and the challenges of adapting to a new town, yet she emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. The encounter in the mud had revealed the strength of her character, and the revelation of Henry's identity had deepened her understanding of trust, respect, and human connection. Together, Clara and Henry built a partnership based on admiration, shared values, and genuine understanding. They discovered that courage and kindness could transform unexpected encounters into life-changing opportunities, and that true connection often appeared when least expected. The story of Clara and Henry became one of hope and inspiration, not just for themselves, but for the town that witnessed their journey. It showed that rejection could lead to growth, that bravery could reveal hidden truths, and that kindness and integrity were qualities that could forge enduring bonds. Clara had come to the town as a stranger, uncertain and vulnerable, but she left as someone who had discovered the strength within herself and the possibility of love and partnership built on mutual respect and admiration. As Clara stood on the porch of the ranch one evening, looking out at the sun setting over the rolling fields, she felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. Life had tested her courage, challenged her resolve, and rewarded her selflessness in ways she had never anticipated. She understood that her journey was a testament to the power of integrity, bravery, and kindness, and she looked forward to the future with hope, confidence, and a deep sense of fulfillment. Her life had changed not because of wealth, social expectation, or circumstance, but because of the choices she had made and the courage she had shown. And in that knowledge, Clara found not only love but a home for her heart, mind, and spirit, a home built on understanding, respect, and the enduring power of human connection.